is Brannon Howse Live. Whether the issue is law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security, Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
All right, good evening. Glad you are with us. My first guest up is the Honorable Alan Dershowitz, author of this book that I have been recommending to you guys. I interviewed him not too long ago about it, told you all of you should get it. And I still am going to implore you to please get a copy, buy multiple copies. Give them to your pastor. Give them to your city council members, your county commissioners. Give them to your sheriff department, sheriff deputies, police officers who are going to be encountering these individuals on the street. And sadly, more and more. Give them to your priest. Maybe even give it to your rabbi. Maybe there's something in here your rabbi needs to know. Education is so important. Readers are leaders. I learned that slogan a long time ago from a good friend of mine, and I love it. Readers are leaders. The war against the Jews, how to end Hamas's barbarism, Alan Dershowitz. He joins us tonight. I wish I had an hour or 2 hours because I have marked this book up. I have flagged it. I only, I think, barely got through the introduction in our last interview. I mean, I could take a chapter and go for an hour per chapter because there's so much good information in this book. But he joins us for what we have, due to his busy schedule, are but a few minutes. He joins us tonight. Mr. Dershowitz, welcome back. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Brannon Howse Live.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the nice thing about my book. You know, I wrote the book in 28 days. I started writing it on October 7th, and I finished it on like the end of October, and it was published by the end of November. It was really a record-breaking. I just had to get it out because I felt so strongly about what happened, not only on the 7th, but on the 8th, when so many people condemned Israel and blamed Israel for the rapes and the slaughters and all of that. And the tragedy is that Hamas is winning. Hamas is benefiting. If you're doing a cost-benefit analysis on October 6th, and somebody says to you, you know, if you go and rape and behead a bunch of babies and kids and kill them and murder them, here's what's going to happen. The International Criminal Court's going to go after Israel. Norway, Ireland, and Spain are going to recognize Palestine. All the kids on college campuses are going to wear kayafas and scream, you know, death to Israel, death to Jews, from the river to the sea. Everybody on Hamas would say, hey, go for it. What's the downside? Yeah, some Palestinian civilians will be killed in Gaza. We don't care about that. We use them as human shields anyway. And so Hamas perceives itself as winning this, and they're just going to do it again and again. And it's going to come to a theater near you because they're not going to stop at Israel. They're coming here.
Indeed, they are. And we covered the story yesterday, played the video. Hamas hostage families released video of Hamas abducting 5 female Israeli soldiers. We played this last night. We play almost every piece of footage like this we can get our hands on because we have got to shake people up to realize this is real. This is not something in the past. It's happening now. In fact, history is repeating itself. And we saw that those Hamas terrorists said that he said to one girl, you're beautiful. You're so beautiful. And then he points at these women and says, these are the women who can get pregnant. Again, people need to realize this is what my friend Usama Dakdok has warned about, who was born and raised in Egypt, and his family as Coptic Christians, and Christians were persecuted. His daddy was planting churches over there, and Hamas was burning them down, Muslim Brotherhood burning them down. And he said, look, this is what they want to do. And he's been telling our audience for years. And then here we have them in their own words. Well, we can get these here pregnant. This is I mean, again, I don't understand from a human standpoint how people can defend this, but they are, as you just said.
Oh, they are, and they don't know half the story. I'm going to give you a scoop now that has never been on any program or any television. The girls who were portrayed, the young women who were portrayed, I met them before this happened, about a year or two ago. They are the young women who stand at the border of Gaza and look through their telescopes and through their computer screens, and they guard every inch of the land to make sure nothing happens. Now, here's the scoop that the parents obviously didn't want to talk about. Many of those women, the reason they're picked for that particular job, which is 8 hours a day, simply sitting and looking at a computer that analyzes maybe 100 yards of land, is because many of those women are mentally challenged. They are autistic, and they have other mental limitations. And so the rapes were not only of Jewish women, but they were of women who, some of them at least, were mentally challenged. And it's obvious when you talk to them. And I can understand why the parents wouldn't want to broadcast that fact about their dead or captured children. But it's a reality, and the whole reality has to be told. There's now a video of a father and a son. Listen to this. A father and a son who jointly admitted that they together with a cousin, a few other people, raped Israeli women. In other words, gang raped the women, 4 or 5 of them, and then murdered the women. But have you heard a word from Me Too? No, Me Too, except if you're a Jew. The Me Too movement says, well, what's the evidence? So here you have the confessions of a father and a son who were captured and have admitted with great details the rapes and the murders. And yet the Me Too movement hasn't said a word. Feminists haven't said a word. What's his name? Clooney, the actor, his despicable wife, who supports Hamas and who supports equating Israel leaders with Hamas, she hasn't said a word. Yes, she said a word. She said that Israeli leaders should be prosecuted, convicted, and sent to prison. But there are so many people out there that you watch on television every day who are supporting Hamas. Yesterday was Harvard's graduation. Today as well, Harvard's graduation. A very large percentage of the students were wearing pro-Hamas garb, either Caiaphas or signals or the red hands. You know, at the Oscar, many of the people at the Oscar ceremony were wearing a pin with red hands. You know what the red hand signifies? It was the lynching of 2 Israeli soldiers who had accidentally gone into a Palestinian city some years ago, and they were literally torn apart and raped and lynched. And the symbol of that was the bloody hand of the murderer being put against the window. That became a photograph, and that became the basis for the red hand that so many Hollywood people wore. One Hollywood person at the entire Oscar wore a ribbon that showed support for the hostages. Everybody else was showing support for Hamas. And so that's the problem. Hamas is winning the war of public relations. They're winning with President Biden in some respects, although he has recently made some good statements. They're winning with this administration, holding back arms. They're winning with the United Nations. They're winning with the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Law. So, of course, they're going to do it again. If at first you succeed, do it again and again and again. And from Hamas's point of view, they have succeeded.
Indeed, they have. And that's, again, it is an information war as well, as you so rightly say, which is why, again, I know you do a lot of interviews, but I'll remind you, we have a reporter on the ground in Israel. We have a Jewish man that was a friend of mine about a year or so before October 7th. He's a licensed tour guide, Aaron Lavarco. We interviewed him when October 7th happened. He went on the air with me for about 8.5 hours over that 2 days, over the weekend. And I said, look, you're out of business as a tour guide for a while. Let us support you financially while you provide updates to our audience. He was just on my radio show again today. He comes on about every other day. My phone was going off today. My red alert app was going off with missiles, rockets going into Israel, one after the other. I said, boy, we better get you back on because this just doesn't stop. So we are covering this because, as you said, it's a propagation war. I mean, this is propaganda. We have to get out here and tell the American people they're being lied to. And I'll just say, as I've been reading through your book again, and I'm marking things up, it's like you knew what was going to happen. I mean, even if you just take the subtitles, like here, can the whole world be wrong about Israel? Question mark. And then I got another subtitle that I marked. Are anti-Israel protesters protected by the First Amendment? Well, that's what everybody's asking, the last few weeks. And people saying this is freedom of speech. And we're saying, how can this be freedom of speech when you're stopping people from getting to their class and they paid for it? You're accosting them. You're assaulting them. You're basically involved in terroristic threats and death threats against them. I mean, so many of the headlines. Here you have this one. International Criminal Court must investigate Russians for war crimes and Ukrainians if warranted. So you are on these issues that are in the headlines right now, and the book's been out a couple months.
Yeah, I predicted it. I predicted it years ago. Because, I called it the baby strategy. Hamas calls it the CNN strategy. What they do is they deliberately kill Israelis, knowing Israel has to retaliate. And then they put human shields, babies, women, young people in the way, knowing that some will be killed inevitably. And then they're ready to parade out the bodies. And CNN, without any criticism, shows the dead bodies. Amapor is a CNN host. She's basically a paid operative of Hamas. She says everything that Hamas wants her to say. And that's true of many others on CNN, true of the New York Times, that runs 9 times as many anti-Israel articles as pro-Israel articles, and MSNBC is even worse. So it was easy to predict because Hamas was going to do it again and again. I'll make a prediction right here and now. It's coming to a theater near you. They're not going to stop with Israel. They have succeeded, and they want to destroy America. And they know if they kill lots of people in America, the world will support them as well, as they supported them when they killed so many people in Israel. And so the world is playing into this. My university, Harvard, where I worked for 50 years, is complicit in this. Yale, where I went to law school, Brooklyn College, where I went to college, they're all complicit in this. None of those universities will allow me to speak about my book or about Israel. They'll bring in terrorist after terrorist, pro-Hamas after pro-Hamas, but they will not allow me, a moderate supporter of Israel, who actually does support, ultimately, in the end, not now, but a two-state solution. But they won't allow me to speak at these university campuses because there's only one narrative, and the narrative is anti-Israel. It's Pravda. And that's why I have to keep writing. I have to tell you, if I were 25 instead of 85, I'd be in Gaza right now as a volunteer. But I'm 55, and so all I can do is write and talk and do what I'm doing now on your wonderful show. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do it.
No, thank you, sir. I want to go back real quick to the young ladies you say that were on those videos, a couple of them that may have autism. Is that because they had specific gifts? And in other words, they were able to look and see and recognize things. And so in other words, a lot of people with autism, not all of them, but many of them are on a stereotype, but a lot of people with autism have very special gifts. I know some autistic people and they have some very special, powerful gifts. Is that why some of them were chosen? Is because their ability to do that kind of surveillance?
Yes, 2 reasons. Number one, IDF is such a moral army that they turn no one down. Even people with Down syndrome, extremely challenged, they give them a uniform. They don't give them a gun, but they give them a uniform. They let them proudly say they're in the IDF. They let them get all the benefits of being in the IDF. Nobody is turned down because every Israeli has the right to serve his or her country. And so when they do draft people like the people that we saw in those films who may be on the spectrum or have autism, they try to get a job for them that suits their capabilities. And for these people, many of them have this extraordinary capability of observation and reporting. And tragically, what happened is some of these women, in fact, reported movements the day before and preparation. And some of the higher up men in the Israeli IDF who were arrogant and maybe a little sexist ignored them. And this could have been prevented. And these young women were on the front line. And of course, that's why so many of them were killed and kidnapped, because they were literally just yards away from the border. I was there with them. I sat with them for several hours, watching them do the observation, watching them do their job. And it was absolutely remarkable. They do it in 8-hour shifts. There are 3 groups, 8 hours each. And for 24 hours a day, they watch. That's why it's so amazing that the Hamas managed to get through all of these precautions, some high tech, some low tech. But what happened is that because Israelis employed so many people from Gaza, they brought them over the border and they gave them 10 times as much pay as they would get in Gaza. And the reward was many of these people who worked for Israelis became spies for Hamas and told them where to locate the people. For example, in one case, a woman named Silver, who was a peacenik, a strong supporter of peace, who would go to Gaza and bring people back to Israeli hospitals. She was hiding when this happened in her safe room, but the people who she helped knew where her safe room was and told the terrorists, and the terrorists burned her alive. And that's the reward you get for trying to bring peace. The people who were killed down there were, many of them, leaders in the peace movement, people who strongly supported the citizens of Gaza, but they got the only reward that Hamas is capable of giving, that is murder, rape, and beheading.
I want to show the cover here, the book, War Against the Jews, How to End Hamas's Barbarism, Alan Dershowitz. All of you need to order this book. Again, I'm not fooling around here, folks. You need to order this book, and you need to pass it out far and wide. People always ask me, what can we do? What can we do? And I keep telling people, sometimes the simplest things you can do is the most profound thing you can do, which is to open people's eyes. Because the thing about deception is, oftentimes people don't know they're being deceived. So here's a chance to give a book to open their eyes and say, you've been deceived, you've been lied to. Now, help us spread the truth. I want to ask you, yes, sir.
One second, if it makes you more comfortable to know this, all of the profits, all of the proceeds from this book go to Israeli charities, not to me. So you'll be doing a mitzvah, you'll be doing a good deed as well if you buy the book. And the only place you can buy it really is on Amazon, because bookstores won't sell this book, even though it was a bestseller. Bookstores won't sell this book because it's not a right-wing book. It's not a left-wing book. It's perceived as a pro-Israel book. And so many independent bookstores just won't have it.
Let me ask you about, well, I hope our audience will order it at Amazon then. Let me ask you about this. This is in my news report tonight. Norwegian foreign minister to post, we recognize Palestinian state after Israel disavowed it. So here we have these various countries, 3 countries there in the EU, supposedly recognizing a Palestinian state or statehood. I mean, where's their currency? What's their capital? I mean, what do you make of this?
Let me explain what the 3 countries are. One is Norway, which is the most Semitic country in all of Europe. I went there. I was invited by a Christian group to come and speak at all the universities at Norway to speak about Israel, sponsored by, again, a Christian group, an evangelical Christian group. I was threatened, harassed. Nobody would meet with me. I've never experienced such blatant anti-Semitism than I did in Norway. Let's take Ireland. Ireland, of course, refused to participate in the war against Hitler. They wouldn't allow American troops and American ships to land in Ireland. They had essentially a standoff policy in relation to the Nazis. They said, "Oh, look, we're against we're not against the Nazis because we're against the British." And of course, Spain is the home of the Inquisition. Spain, when it goes socialist, is always radically anti-Israel, and when it goes conservative, it's pro-Israel. What I would like to have seen is for the United States to remain bipartisan, to have both Republicans and Democrats support Israel. That's not happening. Today, the Republicans are much more supportive of Israel than are many of the Democrats, including some of the Democratic leaders, including Nancy Pelosi, who posed for a cover picture with the most anti-Semitic member of Congress, including Chuck Schumer, former student at Harvard Law School, who I've known for years, who basically tried to interfere with Israeli democracy by saying that essentially Benjamin Netanyahu should be thrown out of office. And so, and so many others in the Democratic Party including Jewish members like Sanders, who was virulently anti-Israel, and some of his statements verge on anti-Semitic, even though he's Jewish. And so, the Democratic Party has not stood up to Hamas. Hamas wants the Democrats to win. They are cheering for the Democrats because they know the Democrats will be more supportive of them than the Republicans would be.
Let me ask you about the International Criminal Court. They're talking about these arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and others. I guess Germany has come out and said, if he steps foot over here, we're going to arrest him. What kind of precedent does this set? As an attorney, tell our audience what you believe this sets in regards to a very dangerous precedent.
Well, it shows that the International Criminal Court is lawless. The statute under which it was established says you can't go after democracies or people who are elected democratically if there's a judiciary that is capable of investigating them. And Israel has investigated and prosecuted 5 of its leaders, 4 of its prime ministers, starting with Rabin, who lost his prime ministership, to Sharon, who was investigated, to Olmert, who went to prison. In fact, I created a joke from that. I visited Olmert in prison, and when I came out, I said, when you ask an Israeli prime minister for his cell number, it's not necessarily his telephone. It could be his jail cell. And, of course, Netanyahu is being prosecuted. And now the president of Israel, 3 back, went to prison. No other democracy on the world today has prosecuted so many of its leaders. And yet the International Court is breaking its laws, breaking its rules. I've been in touch with the prosecutor's office, and I've made my point. I've also been in touch with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a repeated basis, and I have offered to defend any Israeli who is prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. The big loser will be the International Criminal Court. It'll destroy its credibility. It's shocking that Germany is willing to play along with this lawlessness. Maybe in the end they won't, because better minds would prevail. But the United States certainly won't.
Page 39 of your book, The War Against the Jews, How to End Hamas's Barbarism by Alan Dershowitz. Page 39, you say the only way to deter terrorist attacks on Israel is to punish who's responsible. Iran. Yeah. You say there can be no doubt about who instigated the attacks. Hamas, Hezbollah are wholly owned subsidiaries of the Iranian mullahs who call the shots. Even if America cannot prove that Iran explicitly ordered the slaughter in southern Israel, it's clearly responsible for the terrorists perpetrated by Hamas. The only way to stop Hamas and Hezbollah terrorism is to punish Iran. Yet here we see the death of the president of Iran. We see the Security Council, the UN, rise in a moment of silence for the butcher of Tehran. And as you say, this is coming to a theater near you here in the U.S. We know that Iran has terror cells all over this country.
Yeah, but you don't even have to think about what they did on October 7th, because we know they sent hundreds and hundreds of drones and missiles to attack Israeli civilians. Fortunately, the drones were knocked down. Has the International Criminal Court gone after the head of Iran? No. Has the International Criminal Court gone after the head of Syria, who killed more than 100,000 and gassed them with poison gas? No, they've never issued warrants for the head of Iran. They've never issued warrants for the head of Syria. They've never issued warrants for the head of Darfur, where there is an ongoing genocide, or China, which has been declaring war on the Uyghurs. It's selective, and it's the only democracy in history that the International Criminal Court has gone after. It is pure, unadulterated anti-Semitism. That's the only way you can explain why only the nation state of the Jewish people, the leaders, are gone after, but the nation state of the Muslim people, the Arab people, other countries, no, they have immunity. Only the leaders of the nation state of the Jewish people. There's no other way of explaining that than anti-Semitism.
I want to be mindful of your time. Just a couple more questions. You have here on page 118 of your book, why have so many neo-Nazis rallied to Ukraine's cause. I always want to research and document things. I've heard an awful lot. I've seen an awful lot from other people. But then when I see someone such as yourself, who is so meticulous in your documentation, writing these things, I have to, first of all, say thank you, because I wanted to have someone of your caliber nail it down for me. And yet, here we go. Here it is. You're saying right here, there's a neo-Nazi problem right there in Ukraine. But that doesn't seem to be talked about by much in the media, does it?
No, in fact, I met with Zelensky. I spoke with him about it, and he acknowledged it. It's one brigade, but they wear overtly Nazi symbols. And after all, Ukraine was the worst country, after Nazi Germany, maybe Austria, but Ukraine was probably worse than Austria in terms of killing Jews, Babi Yar and other places, the rampant anti-Semitism and neo-Nazism. And a lot of it came to Canada, by the way. Do you know that Canada has one of the worst records in dealing with the Second World War? During the war, they refused to accept a single Jew as a refugee. What the Minister of Absorption said was, even one is too many. Then as soon as the war was over, they opened the doors to neo-Nazis, Nazis, Nazi war criminals, and there are tens of thousands of Nazis, including many, many Nazi war criminals, living today in Canada. And so there are not, and in Argentina, many of the worst Nazis escaped, many to Argentina, some to Canada, and some with the help of some people that should have known better.
And I think we brought some here over what's called Operation Paperclip or something and put them at NASA in various places. Edwin Black wrote a great book about this.
Those were just a few handfuls. What happened in Canada was a disgrace. Thousands and thousands of neo-Nazis who were allowed welcome after they wouldn't welcome in a single. In Argentina, the same thing. People like Mengele lived his life, a peaceful life, died natural causes, with his grandchildren on his knees, having murdered and butchered all these Jewish babies and children after experimenting with them. So there are a lot of countries that are at fault here, and now it's coming back. And a lot of these same countries are now condemning Israel for acting in self-defense and praising Hamas for its horrible brutality.
Well, there's so much I could talk to you about. I guess I'll save it for another interview if you would please come back, because I have more pages to talk to you about. But I want to be mindful of your time and respect your time. I do have one final question that's in the news, and that, of course, is what's going on with President Trump. I see that you were in the courtroom the other day. Would you like to give our audience your perspective of what's going on in that New York courtroom?
It's a scandal. There's no case there. There's no crime. Even after weeks and weeks, nobody can figure out what the actual crime is. And I was in the courtroom when the judge cleared the courtroom. And for some bizarre reason, I didn't get cleared out. So I saw him angrily yelling at a lawyer, "You were looking at me." It reminded me of that scene from Taxi Driver where the psycho cab driver says to someone, "You looking at me? You looking at me? You looking at me?" You know, that's what the judge was saying. He was so thin-skinned. He is so obviously prejudiced against Donald Trump that there's no possibility of a fair trial.
Wow. War Against the Jews, How to End Hamas's Barbarism. Only available, folks, on Amazon. Unfortunately, because of, I guess, the book censoring that's going on, the craziness that's going on. I want to show it real quick if I could find it again here on my Amazon. I thought I had it pulled up here. I must have taken it down by mistake. But there it is, folks. You got to get the book. The War Against the Jews, How to End Hamas's Barbarism. Tons and tons of history in here. Folks, if you want the truth, it's footnoted, it's documented. I know it to be true because I've been studying Hamas for years. I did a 10 one-hour series on Hamas. I know what he's saying in here is true. And even for a guy who's learned a lot about Hamas, I learned a lot reading this book, and I need you guys to get a copy and help us. I don't get anything for saying go buy a copy. What I get is educated Americans and people around the world helping us to fight this anti-Semitism that you guys know we have stood against for so many years, including our documentary and conference warning that this was coming 5 years ago. And this is another gentleman who has been warning that this was coming, and here it is. And he's telling us the truth we need to know to offset this propaganda. Mr. Alan Dershowitz, as always, thank you for your time. We appreciate your being so generous with it, and we look forward to having you back.
I look forward to coming back. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Alan Dershowitz checking in, folks. Please get the book, War Against the Jews. It's at Amazon. Again, get copies for your family, your friends. Give one to your pastor. You know, I'm really tired of these Protestant evangelical pastors being so silent on this. There is no excuse for it. None. And these evangelical pastors better get with the program fast. They better learn. The Hamas and these guys have said they're coming for the Saturday people. That's people who go to the synagogue. And then they said we're going for the Sunday people. That's the Protestants that go to church on Sunday. So these Protestant pastors, they better wake up. They better start informing their congregation, because you know what? As Mr. Dershowitz said, it's coming to a theater near you. Unfortunately, it's going to be coming to synagogues and churches near us if we don't wise up real fast. We thank Mr. Dershowitz for not only the book, but his time tonight. We'll be right back after this break.